I know you're probably not in my district.
Good morning and welcome to the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada Board of Directors. Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, your agenda is in order and ready for approval.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, your next item is to receive the General Manager's report. We're happy to be talking to you about Viva Bike Vegas to begin with. And we are really excited because for the first year ever, we're going to have our ride that's going to go down the Las Vegas Strip. We'll have a rolling closure along the Las Vegas Strip for 3 bicycle rides, a 103-mile ride, a 60-mile ride, and a 17-mile ride. We expect at this point about 1,600 participants. We'll be starting Saturday morning at 5:30 a.m. And all the lights on the strip from the hotels are going to be on. It will be dark. It will be a great spectacle. And to have the strip full of bicycles will be a wonderful, wonderful experience. Now, we're pleased to report that RTC Commissioner Deborah March has elected to ride on one of the rides with us, along Tina and myself. And we'd like to just thank and recognize the RTC staff, Jackie Dennis in particular, MJ Maynard, and their staff have, this is an event that they work year-round on so that it can be executed very well. I have received so many compliments over the years for how well this ride, these rides are structured and supported. It is very important to us to acknowledge that bicycles are indeed a legitimate mode of transportation on our roadway networks. Not only does this help clean the air, but this helps clean our arteries as well. It's a great, healthy practice, and we're looking forward to enjoying Viva Bike Vegas on October 15th this year.
A new home base?
New home base this year will be at Town Square Mall. Since we have so many people that want to participate in this ride, it really is not logistically feasible for us to continue to do it here at the RTC Clark County Flood Control Government Center complex. We just don't have the parking that's necessary to accommodate all of the carnival. Yeah, afterwards, we have a bicycle festival, and with everyone that's coming in from out of town and from all over, we just don't have the capability to do that here logistically in this complex. So we're moving to Town Square Mall this year.
Councilwoman.
I would just like to encourage all of my fellow commissioners to join us either this year or come and plan for next year. If you need a bike, I've got an extra one. So, yeah, train for next year. Okay.
Commissioner G.
Thank you. So for constituents that ask, if they needed to, they could actually come to the downtown center, hop on one of our buses, put their bikes on, and then go down to Town Square, because that's the launch point, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Second thing is, I think one of my constituents, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, so you might want to just put it out there, that you're promoting the 3-foot law that was passed for bikes. So you might want to comment a little bit further on that.
I would be happy to do that, and you did mention that to me. We have on our T-shirts for all the staff that are supporting this ride and for all the participants, we are advertising the new law that was passed in the legislature, to where if you're a driver, you're a motorist, and you're overtaking someone on a bicycle that's going in front of you, you must give them at least 3 feet of clearance, unless there is an available lane to your left that you can pull into. And if there is an available lane to your left, you need to pull into that lane to give adequate clearance to a cyclist. It's the If that lane's not there, you need to give them at least 3 feet of clearance. We call it the 3-foot rule, and we'll be advertising that as part of Viva Bike Vegas, and it's on our clothing and our apparel as well.
Thank you. I just thought it was important to bring that up. A constituent had suggested that we do something in our newsletters as well to remind people. And then just remind people a bike is considered by law a vehicle, and you're supposed to ride with the traffic, not against it, and you're not supposed to be on sidewalks. So that's still an educational piece that needs to be done out there. I may be on my Sears Pink Huffy, but I will not be with you all because I don't want to be embarrassed.
He did say it would be a spectacle. Vice Chairman Elison and I will be welcoming the riders back as we play host in the beer garden.
That would be interesting.
Please continue.
Thank you. While we're in that vein, the RTC was recently recognized by the League of American Bicyclists, which is a national bicycle-friendly advocacy group, with the silver designation, being that we are the silver state, for Nevada's first bicycle-friendly business award. With this silver designation, the RTC was specifically recognized for encouraging cycling as an easy option for transportation and providing amenities such as the RTC Bike Center for our electric bicycle program, our dedicated bicycle lanes, and the RTC bicycle map, which contains all sorts of route information about where you can ride both on-street and off-street here in Southern Nevada, and for the Club Ride program that encourages and promotes cycling as a leisure and commuter transportation alternative for all Southern Nevadans. Now, I'd like to call Mr. Jim Champeau to present this award to you. It was Jim's idea to get the application going to start this process with the League of American Bicyclists. And it was his initiative that really got us recognized. It wouldn't have happened without Jim's efforts. He's been very involved in our Viva Bike Vegas event every year. He also is a professional cyclist now, and I'd like to have him come forward and, first be recognized, and he'd like to present this award to the commission. Jim?
Good morning.
Good morning. This is kind of a culmination of a lot of hard work that a lot of the RTC employees have done, all the way from our management to our planners, our engineers, and we're really proud of it. It's great that we have the support of the RTCs for cyclists like myself, and you know, with the e-bike program and a lot of the things that we do. So I'd love to present this to you guys.
Your chair. You accept them right now.
Now, this is an original piece of artwork by a nationally recognized artist, and we will be hanging this proudly in the RTC building. So congratulations to the RTC, and congratulations to Jim for that great work. Next, we want to talk to you about the Boulder Highway and the Henderson and Downtown Express. These services were recently launched last month. They connect downtown Henderson with the southeastern Port of the Valley and downtown Las Vegas. And since opening, both these services are doing extremely well. We anticipate that our ridership is going to increase like all of our express routes has as we've introduced them. Councilwoman March rode with me in on the Henderson to Downtown Express this morning. We had a very smooth and comfortable ride, arrived here on time. And to promote the Henderson to Downtown Express and the Boulder Highway Express services, the RTC will be offering free rides only on these two routes to locals with valid Nevada identification starting on Friday, October 21st through Monday, October 31st in celebration of Nevada Day. And so locals can ride for free on these two routes, October 21st through Monday, October 31st. And with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, that concludes the General Manager's report.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We now go to item number 3 on your agenda, which is to conduct a comment period for citizens participation. And we do have a new process for handling comments from the public. And I believe you have that information to announce that to the
I do.
public,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman.
Jacob. Would like to ask if you wish to speak during this part of the public comment on an agenda item that you fill out a card. They're available at the podium here and also out in the hallway. And there are people walking around if anybody wishes to fill out a card. And again, as a reminder, the first public comment period is for those items that are posted on today's agenda. Anyone wishing to speak to the Commission? Mark Ladenson?
Thank you. Mark Ladenson, 6885 West Lone Mountain Road, apartment 176. Thank you, esteemed manager and esteemed Board of Commissioners, esteemed Chairman and Vice Chairman, for providing me with the opportunity to address you today. I'm appearing here before this Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada Board of Commissioners meeting today to speak freely, openly, candidly, and bluntly in expressing my own point of view with regard to final resolution of the RTC contract matter concerning Veolia Transportation and First Transit. In expressing myself, I represent only myself. I have neither family nor friends nor a financial stake nor a financial interest in either entity. No one put me up to this. No one owns me. No one controls me. No one is paying me, nor am I in any way financially benefiting personally by virtue of my delivery of the speech or the opinions contained therein. Having got all that out of the way, I will now commence. My express purpose here today is to demonstrate my unequivocal and unanimous support for any initiative brought before this Board of Commissioners today to vote upon, which once and for all ends the deadlock and the impasse with regard to determining which company procures the RTC contract. I am in 100% undivided and unabashed support of the folks who delivered me here today to these very doorsteps, those folks being the greatly underappreciated and greatly dedicated men and women who comprise the entire workforce of Veolia Transportation. Whatever happened to the word loyalty? Whatever happened to the system in this country which used to reward folks who worked hard and played by the rules? I don't see enough of that happening within these hallowed chambers, particularly over the course of the last 5 months. Now, it seems to me that it would be a horrible idea, and I would be 100% opposed to it. That idea being any resolution that passes this Board of Commissioners today that would have us start all over, go back to scratch, return once again to the beginning of a long, drawn-out process of fact-gathering in order to make a determination many, many months further into the future as to who obtains this contract. Similarly, I would also be 100% opposed to any resolution that passes this Board of Commissioners today that calls for splitting up and dividing up rather evenly the contract between the two entities represented here today. That would be a very misguided attempt to placate and please everybody, and great leaders like President Harry Truman didn't give a fig about placating and pleasing everybody. President Truman's greatness resided in his ability to make difficult and unpopular...
Mark, since you were not forewarned...
Please let me continue. No one told me that.
Pause for a moment. Our new traffic signal is programmed to show 2 minutes of a green light, 30 seconds of a yellow, and 30 seconds of a flashing yellow, the 3 minutes allotted, which it will turn red, and as we have just heard and seen, it will buzz. Mark, because you were not forewarned, how much more do you have?
One more page, sir.
Please.
I'll be as quickly, go through as
thank
quickly
you.
as I can. Thank you
You go
for
ahead.
allowing me to do that. President Truman's greatness resided in his ability to make difficult and unpopular decisions while at the same time withstanding the heat of the kitchen, so to speak. I'm calling upon this body today to act in the same spirit, to exhibit greatness in your decisiveness, just as my favorite President Truman did on many occasions. Now, I wish to commend the 4 commissioners who have previously exhibited, both through their words and their actions at previous RTC Board of Commissioners meetings, unquestioned support for Veolia transportation. Thank you, all 4 of you, for your insight and for your wisdom. Thank you for your undivided loyalty to the dedicated workforce of Veolia transportation. Those dedicated men and women are the lifeblood that flows through the arteries of the entire system. Minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. And as we all know, the system covers all the great communities that are represented here today. So this is my mindset here today, a win-win solution that begins first and foremost by using the available evidence before us today to vote in favor of awarding the contract to the company most likely to offer those fine employees the best wage and benefit contract package. It is my firm belief that when the employees win, the public wins and the RTC wins. Uplifting and maintaining employee morale is of critical importance in guaranteeing the continuing success of our entire transit system. Again, my 100% complete and overwhelming support today is for the awarding of the contract to Veolia. My fear, my worry, my anxiety is that any resolution that this Board of Commissioners passes today that awards the contract to First Transit will, in my view, likely result in either major reductions in their employee salaries, major reductions in their employee benefits, or even worse. Worse being the entire laying off of the entire existing workforce and replacing them all with the lowest tiered entry-level employees being paid the lowest tiered wage. That is my worry and my concern. Why is the contract bid submitted by First Transit $50 million below the contract bid submitted by Veolia? Could not a reasonable person come to the very reasonable conclusion that First Transit will, by virtue of their lower bid, be compelled and forced to come up with a $50 million saving solution in order for that firm to be able to perform and execute the contract while at the same time making a profit? Could not a reasonable person conclude that the easiest way to achieve system-wide savings would be the reduction of employee wages and benefits totaling exactly $50 million? Again, that is my worry, my fear, my concern, and my belief. Please do not be fooled, swayed, misled, deceived, or brainwashed into acceptance of any oral assertions of representatives of First Transit here today. Oral assertions carry no weight. I painfully know this through my own life experience, as there have been many who have lied to me, deceived me, misled me, and made oral assertions to me that in the end were only false promises never delivered upon. There is no one here in this room today that has ever done that to me, thankfully, I might add. President Ronald Reagan had it right when he said, "Trust but verify." Only documents and contracts with written words that hold legally binding contract language should be believed. Anything less is mere sales puffery. So to the 4 commissioners who have previously backed First Transit being awarded this contract, I can only say this: please reconsider your vote right now before it is too late. Please demonstrate loyalty to the company who has provided sterling service to your communities now for many years. Please take into consideration the needs of the affected employees, who I firmly believe will suffer catastrophic financial losses in income and benefits should you continue your support of First Transit and that continued support results in their being awarded the contract. Please stand up for the rights of working people who are here present before you today, entangled through no choice of their own in the most dire fight for their livelihoods. I will close now with a quote attributed to Pat Riley. Show your opponents the ultimate respect by showing them no respect at all. Any commissioner who today casts their vote against Veolia Transportation will be strictly politically speaking my opponent. Please do not underestimate me in a political sense. I can move mountains, and I will move mountains. I need say nothing more. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And just so everyone knows, I came here with Veolia drivers. Thank you.
Todd Farlow? Todd? Did you fill out a card? That's participation. Vincent Marsh? And Vincent, as you come up, let me remind you of the new traffic signal. 2 minutes of green, 30 seconds of yellow, 30 seconds of flashing yellow. And with respect to all the other speakers, would ask you to stay within those 3 minutes. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Vincent Marsh. I want to ask the committee why you can't have your meet in the afternoon because the other people can come down to have this, in this meeting. And then in another thing, I'm going to add, Snow, why you got your buses running on Sunday every hour? Because you're making people late from work.
We have a reduced schedule on Sunday. You can answer all your questions after the meeting if you'd like. But it's not a time for back and forth and asking questions. You can make comments.
Okay.
But we won't be able to answer questions until after the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Latrice Caldwell. Likewise, as a reminder, this comment period is for those items posted on today's agenda. At the end of the meeting, there's also a general public participation, at which Mr. Farlow will be our first speaker.
Mr. Chairman, you might ask that they identify which item they're speaking to for the benefit of the board.
Good morning. I'm Latrice Caldwell, and I'm going off the agenda, if you don't mind, a little bit.
On what agenda item?
Huh?
What agenda item are you going to speak to?
Concerning the fixed route.
Okay,
I want to ask a question.
thank you.
And the paratransit, I would like to ask those questions. First, I want to thank the staff behind the scene for calling me when I got hurt. And I want to apologize for those that I wasn't too pleasant with for the RTC. And I would like to ask the question concerning the fixed route. I live on Owens at Davis Place for the 209 bus. They'll stop running real early. They are hour buses. And concerning the 214 on the weekends, for those that go to church and rely on those buses, they only run every hour on D Street. Will there be a chance of changing some of those? And one more question concerning the fixed routes. When buses meet up at a cross, are there any way that you all could have the bus to wait on the other bus like they used to do back in the day when I first got here? Call the bus to hold till the people can board that bus, especially on the hour. Winter or summer is an hour is a long time. Fortunately, I'm in a chair for the time being, but for those elder peoples older than I am, and the younger ones that have medical issues, I would like to go off gender to see if you all could adjust some of those for the fixed route. The 209, which the 214, the west side. I think it's a little bit unfair for the gambling halls to have the 30 minutes and the 20 minutes, but the people that try to get to their jobs, church, or surrounding areas with the 1 hour buses, I'm asking you all if you are in your next meeting could bring that to the agenda, please, or in the future. And also for the paratransit same-day rides, they're only good to Monday through Friday. Could you all look in the future by extending that for 7 days instead of 5 days? I would like for you all to add that to the agenda. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you all for what you've done. God
Thank you,
bless.
Ms. Caldwell. And we'll have a staff member. We'll have a staff member get with you on those specifics. Next speaker is Terry Odell. Good morning.
Morning. Carrie Odell, I live in Las Vegas. My major concern is for the seniors like her. I live on the 108 line and the Boulder Highway. I have complained about several things to supervisors about what they're doing on these buses. It seems supervisors on the Bonneville transfer station does not care about anyone but themselves. I don't care if you give it to First Transit or to Viola, but they need to be told that they need to help with the seniors, the elderly, and the disabled. Thank you.
Thank you. TL, last name is a VOL. TL here this morning? Voldelich? That's a K. Thank you.
How you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning. Will someone please partner with me and make sure all the commissioners and you, sir, and your staff get copies? Thank you. I'm okay with it. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, Honorable Commissioners, Mr. Snow, fine staff, and friends. I'm Tom Vuktelich. I'm from North Las Vegas, and I'm with Veolia Transportation. These are my glasses. As a professional transit operator, they're one of my most important pieces of equipment. I don't really need the top part to drive my bus, although my eyes are accustomed to it. I do need the bottom part in order to read your fare boxes and make sure you are receiving your proper revenue. My glasses are quite a high-quality piece of work. Because of my Veolia benefits, I paid about half the regular cost. And there are many styles of glasses that I could have had for only a $10 copay. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you this morning that the company that provides decent, quality medical and dental benefits, including vision benefits for commercial drivers, is the high-quality provider here. the correct bidder with the correct cost and the correct price. This morning, I submit to you that the company that has been able to resolve its difficulties with organized labor, and they were quite thorny at one point, that company that now has a settled, ratified contract in place is the organization, the combination, that is worthy of your business and your trust as you seek to carry out your responsibilities in caring for this community. This fine morning, I urge you to motion for and vote for an award to Veolia by no less than 8-0. Your questions are welcome. Thank you for your valuable time and attention.
Thank you. Patricia Anderson, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Like I said, everyone knows I've been here coming to meetings since 2001. I feel that you have great drivers, and I don't know all names, but I know a lot of faces. I'm encouraging them. I'm supporting them each and every day. And we need them to have their contract signed as soon as possible. It's not legal for them to drive. They should be not driving. There should be not one bus on Las Vegas Boulevard and driving right now, because I'm from New York City. And it's not legal for them to drive without a license. There's no contract. They should have it. The 213 bus, I don't know why you took it off the line, because it was a good bus. But again, you go take it down to Maryland Parkway. I know I'm not going to take up any more time, but you have good drivers. Protect your drivers, and try to keep your drivers, because the simple reason is you're losing good drivers because they're frustrated, and it's not fair to them, okay? So I'm supporting them, I keep supporting them, and hope the contract is signed real soon.
Thank you. Having no more cards in front of me, we will close this public comment period. Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We now go to your consent agenda, which is made up of items 4 through 49.
Comments or questions? There's a motion on the floor. Commissioner Giuliani?
Is this the appropriate time that if we need an item taken off the consent agenda?
Yes, it is.
Then, let's see, what did we talk about yesterday? 34. And 40?
Items 34 and 40.
And 41, I'm sorry. 31, yes. 34, 40, and 41, if we might, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
And then I would move for approval with those.
Motion on the
Mr.
floor
Chair?
as amended.
Mr. Tobin might have one. Sorry.
I'm
Can
sorry,
we move
Mayor?
those to the back of the regular agenda, so we can discuss the first ones that show up? If we can move those to the back of the regular agenda, I'd
He
appreciate it.
wants to trail them to the end of the
Yes.
agenda.
End of the entire agenda. Okay. I don't have any problem with that. Board members? Okay. So the motion on the floor, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We now go to item number 50, which is to discuss litigation related to the fixed route service contract filed against the RTC by First Transit with the agency's counsel. And I need to note that this item may be closed to the public by action of the commission pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute 241.0152B2 in order to consider a legal matter.
Is a motion to go into closed session? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
So we go in the back.
We'll call the meeting back to order, and thank you, everyone here today, for your patience. Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are at item number 50. The board may provide direction to council now that we're back from our closed session. And if you'd like to direct us to move on, we can move on to item 51. It's the board's prerogative.
Please.
Item 51 is to approve an agreement between the RTC and First Transit for operation and maintenance of fixed route transit services from the date of notice to proceed through September 30th, 2014, with two two-year option periods, and authorize the chairman to sign or take other action as appropriate and direct staff accordingly. Now, the staff recommendation is the same as it has always been, to award this contract to First Transit, but there are other options for the board to consider, and RTC General Counsel Zev Kaplan will explain those options to the board at this time.
Commissioners, consistently we've advised you, originally you had three options: award the contract based on the recommendation, score it yourselves. As I have discussed with you, I don't think that's a viable option anymore, and I don't think there's ever been any expression of interest in doing that by this board in past meetings. Your third option is reprocure, and as you were informed and are aware from the FTA letters you've received, any reprocurement needs to be based on a sound business reason.
And I would just put onto the record, as far as our closed-door session, as was indicated by Mr. Kaplan, we were being briefed on recent district court ruling from Judge Baer, and not only that ruling, but also the implications of these options and discussions as far as what other options may be available to the board.
And just for the record, for clarification for everyone, the board's aware of this, the judge issued some findings and rulings from the bench. There has not officially been an order in that matter yet entered with the clerk. The judge has not issued that to this date, at least not to my knowledge, unless he's done so today.
I will open it up to the board for comments, questions, and/or a motion.
I would move that we not select First Transit and direct staff to reprocure by dividing up the area appropriately for the purposes of bidding.
Okay. Anyone going to put any remarks on the record? I will. Thank you. Couple things, and I do ask your indulgence, because this may be a little bit longer than the flashing yellow light. But first and foremost, I want to make sure that this record, along with every other public hearing regarding this issue, is still part of the total public record.
That's correct. Everything that you've considered at your public meetings on this matter are all part of the entire public record regarding this procurement.
And it's been very difficult, especially being on this board as long as I have, this whole process, because this board, and through their statements over the last few months, and certainly in their actions, everybody has voted their conscience. Everybody has placed on the record reasons. And I think there's been a lot of respect. We, as a board, and for the first time in my recollection, have just agreed to disagree. It's not a reflection on any individual board members. It's certainly not a reflection on staff, Mr. Snow, his senior management team, and throughout the organization. But this is a first for the RTC, certainly the magnitude and the struggle that we have had addressing these issues. But it's not different from what we're seeing throughout Clark County. And I can speak certainly on behalf of Clark County. Every 2 weeks when we meet, we are having the smallest contracts, 50,000, 100,000, up to 25, 30 million, being challenged. Challenged for reasons that have never been raised before, be it a typo, a failure to submit a DBE form, votes being taken, then ask for reconsideration. The point being, this is not unlike, not only in magnitude as far as cost, but in magnitude of the importance of the project. This is no different from some of the other things that we've seen over the last 18 months. The purpose of my comments today is I've been a little frustrated with some of the legal documents that have been filed over the last few months, some correspondence from the FTA, which we recently received our second correspondence from the FTA because there was a real concern raised 2 months ago that if we don't act, the FTA, I think their language was, we urge you to award today. That was softened. I don't think they were as threatening, but they were very specific in their language. And by their own guidelines, we are allowed to reject a bid. We are allowed to go against a staff recommendation. They encourage us to follow all federal law, all the reprocurement rules, and most importantly, sound business practice. And that is defined by many of us in many ways, but it's certainly a common sense that if you're going to vote one way, that there's reason and justification why you are choosing that. Doesn't mean that we're going to agree, and obviously we haven't, but it does not take away the reasoning behind everyone's vote. I think there has been a very good record made, and I think it's been sound business decisions and sound business practices. But I want to reiterate some of the things that some of my colleagues have stated, and certainly that I have stated. Probably first and foremost, it started back on March 10th when, through a normal process, the first time this board was aware of this RFP publicly was an agenda item that was not a public hearing per our council, but we directed staff to negotiate a contract with First Transit before we ever had a chance to meet with either applicant or have a public hearing. And that was a mistake, procedurally. That train left the station, and since the train left the station, is that Ozzy Osbourne back there? He's got a station song. Whose phone? And this comment has been made, we have been chasing that train from March 10th. And that's with changing information, changing litigation, all parties involved, last-minute information, including getting correspondence while we're in a closed-door session back there. I said it before and I'll say it again. It is so unfair to this board to give us information at the 24th hour and have us digest that and turn around and put it into public policy. The whole process has been chasing that train, and we have addressed that. I think at a later agenda item we're going to talk about ways we can improve the system. The comment's been made by public and some of the principals involved that the RFP is a good one. I don't think there's been disagreement on this board that the RFP is a good one. That the FTA thinks it's a good one. That our FTA counsel, outside counsel, said it's a good one. And that there are opportunities within the RFP that firms could protest questions, ask for changes, clarifications. That's all passed. So if it's all passed and we have a recommendation on good, why don't we just approve it? Well, here's the thing that needs to be stated publicly that you have to understand. If we did that, there's no sense for this board to have public hearings. If everything's set, staff's got a good recommendation, we're not going to hold a public hearing, let's rubber stamp it and go. I think it's incumbent upon us to challenge, question, ask, clarify, and we had not the opportunity when this process began. At least personally, I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 months, including information I received yesterday. There was no less than 9 pieces of correspondence involved in this issue in the last 48 hours. And it's the nature of the beast. This market's so competitive. It's so competitive. But what we can do, according to the FDA, according to our counsel, is if we are going to reject, then we have to justify that vote. We have to indicate why. And we go back to the good business sense. And it says specifically, we need to go back to the RFP and address the criteria. And that's what I'd like to do first. The technical evaluation was 45% weighted. The pricing was 55%. The question was asked months ago, why do we did it that way? I think the general manager appropriately has said that price was a far greater import today than it was just a few years ago when it was 70% technical and 30% price. So there was a dramatic shift. That was Jacob's decision, and I think the board, looking forward, would like to get involved on that in the front end. But the weighting was a lot different. The criteria on the technical side that we could evaluate was broken into 6 items, and this is in the RFP. I'm not going to go through them all, but earlier, on a few of the public hearings, I made the statement that a few of those numbers struck me as almost an anomaly, that they didn't make sense. They seemed to be out of proportion. And if, which in some cases you may do on a subjective evaluation, is throw those out, the argument was made that that would change the whole staff recommendation. 2 numbers. But that's not good enough. I went and started looking at the numbers. And I won't go, again, I won't pick them out or tell you which evaluators, because I don't even know who the evaluators are. But the more I looked at this, the more I saw further anomalies. That, for instance, there were 6 criteria, and the first criteria was worth 25%, and that was project management, key personnel, which I think is appropriate. The 6th, and these are in order of importance, the 6th was innovative approaches and technologies, something that certainly retrospectively, but something I would have thought would be as important as anything else we're evaluating. The innovation, the technologies, ways to generate more revenue, some component. Out of 100%, that was worth 5%. That was almost a throwaway. And, Jake, I don't even know. I don't even know who designated the weighted percentages on the 6. And I apologize, you should have asked this in the back room. Was that part of the RFP?
I'll have to ask Lydia Belinsky, who was in charge of this procurement, to come up, and I think she can answer that question for you.
Good morning. The weights were not disclosed in the RFP. Best practice is not to, you can or cannot put them in the actual document to let the proponents see. Most transit agencies don't include those numbers because they don't want the proponent to focus on just the highest, the element that's weighted the highest. So that's why they're listed in order of importance. But the group that actually worked to put together the RFP made a consensus on how to weight the scoring and what the weights for the individual items would be. So it was all figured out prior to the issuance of the proposal, but it wasn't actually in the RFP document itself, other than in the order.
So anyone interested in the RFP would see these 6 criteria in order of importance.
Correct.
But not see what we were going to judge as weight.
Correct, other than the fact that it was disclosed that the price would be 55% weighted at 55.
Little separate issue. And not surprisingly, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you don't need to come back up. Not surprisingly, project management, project experience, staffing and personnel, all within 1.5% First Transit, and Veolia. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. No one has questioned these firms, their ability, their wherewithal, their staffing, their experience. That was expected. There was almost a 12% variance in vehicle and facility maintenance, which was surprising. And I'll get to that a little bit later in Jeremy Aguero's report, because that, you would think that would be a lot closer. Quality of required plans, almost 7% variation again. I think that was, staff rated those pretty high. But the innovative approaches and technologies is the one that surprised me a little bit. It was a 12.5% variation between the two firms. And that's significant. Out of the scoring of 100%, one of the firms got over 96% on that, the highest score on any evaluation. The second firm was 83.75. Why is that important? Because again, from my mind, I'm thinking in a lot of the documents, both legal documents that both sides have sent and the RTC's internal documents, they talk about the difference between ITBs and a request for proposals, the RFP, and the invitation to bid, the ITB, is geared more on a strict price. And I want to read this for the record, so it's quote. Although price is a factor to be considered in an RFP, the evaluation of the proposal will be based on all of the criteria specified in the RFP. Certainly, an indication that price is important, but so are the 6 technical criteria. And yet, one of the things that I personally would have said is critically important is worth 5%. Furthermore, and this was taken, I think, from, again, one of the lawsuits filed, they reference Dana Larson, Rubel and Associates versus Board of Commissioners of Canyon County, Idaho, 1993, talking about the same issue. An RFP is flexible, identifies the problem, and requests a solution. Consideration of a response to an IFB is controlled by cost. That is the lowest and the best bid. Whereas consideration of an offer of an RFP is controlled by technical excellence as well as cost. So we are out there with an RFP. A lot of the documents that have been filed by both firms in lawsuits talk about this RFP being different from price and low cost. They talk about this technical side. And yet not only do we inverse from 70 technically to 30, we go 45 to 55, weighing towards cost, and then on 6 factors, which for whatever reason, and maybe it's industry standard, but to me doesn't make as much sense as it should, there's definitely a lack of import placed on some of these technical criteria such as innovations. So these numbers, the more I looked at them, and again, this is with no disrespect to staff, because I don't know who staff is in this situation, but this is the only document, or one of the few documents, as a board member, I can challenge in making a decision to vote. And that's why I've spent so much time on it. But our narrative, and I wrote this one down, our narrative and intent do not match up with our weighted criteria. If the RFP, certainly price is important, but we seem to push technical excellence aside. And that one, the numbers, to me, indicated that. I will save this for perhaps a future deposition, but then I took all those numbers and broke them down even further to compare when both firms did their original proposal, what the rating was, versus their best and final offer. And that was interesting because it brought out some, I think, anomalies. Be more than happy to share those with staff or somewhere down the road if we go further litigation. But in the interest of time, I'll move on. Price. and this is not a new statement for the record, but just to add some depth to it, price was I don't know what the term was, but I'll just say a strictly math evaluation. We took the proposals, added them up, made sure we added them up, and that was the number. In this case, First Transit got 100 points as the low bid, Veolia 91, 92, whatever. But according to the RFP, which is a good RFP by many statements made, this board doesn't have the ability to question that. It's just a strict math. The only thing we can challenge is, did someone add wrong? Did someone put a space where a number belonged? We had to focus all on the technical, and that's wrong. And again, looking forward, it has to change, because we can't just rubber stamp someone that puts in a bid. I don't care if it's an RFP, RTC, Clark County. Someone puts in a bid with a cost associated. It's, again, incumbent upon us, not only as staff, but as electeds, to be able to challenge the numbers, to make sure they're realistic, feasible, appropriate. But in this case, we didn't really have that option until it became such an issue. The RTC went out and hired Jeremy Aguero, applied analysis. I would state publicly, a very respected economist in town, to address this issue, because there were a lot of questions asked, and anybody that was at the May 19th meeting will certainly remember that. And I don't have the thick report, but I will reference Jeremy's executive summary, which not only he shared at that meeting, but also provided a presentation which closely matches it. RTC hired Applied Analysis for a preliminary review of the price proposals included in the best and final offers. And I don't think either firm questioned it, that we brought Jeremy in to look at that. In fact, according to the report, that he actually contacted and worked with both firms as far as clarifying numbers and getting some proprietary information. So there was at least agreement among the RTC and the two firms that Jeremy was going to do this body of work. Statements have been made from the general look at the report and what it means from a price analysis. Both First Transit and both Veolia stood up in this room on the public record and said, RTC, your expert ruled us the best value, which is amazing because obviously there's some different perspectives there. Then I talked at length with staff and some of the folks that know a lot more about pricing analysis than I do, and started to go back. And one of the things that became very obvious is the perhaps misinformation that's been out there. Everybody talks about this $50 million, and to whoever's credit, the first one that threw it against the wall, it stuck, and to this day, people are still talking $50 million. And that is not true. We can break down the first 3 years, and Jeremy does here, with a baseline value of 19.4, which divided by 3, roughly 6.46 million in year one. Not 7 plus, 6.46. And then people seem to forget that in year one, per the contract, the First Transit is awarded 2.5 or a number close to that for transition costs. Veolia is given $500,000 for exit costs. So that's at least $3 million more. So without making one assumption from this report, year one, the cost differential is somewhere, give or take, around $3 million. And when we talk about that, people say, no, it's $50 million. And it's not. It's simply not. The assumptions that Jeremy goes into, and he took some assumptions. Some of the assumptions brought that figure down, and I'm not going to read the whole report, but a couple things that I will put on the record, because this is what trying to follow sound business practice and principles and looking for justification why I'm going to vote. Jeremy brought up a couple issues that I think need to go on the record if they have not already been placed. When he talks about salaries and wages, although both companies have a relative similar number of full-time and part-time employees and the average hourly wages they make, they, being the firms, make materially different assumptions for overtime and meal break premiums. That has been an issue that I don't even think Jeremy got into as much because of the so-called collective bargaining issue, but there was a huge discrepancy. By far the majority of the cost differential dealt in assumptions dealing with salary, wages, benefits, health insurance. And I don't think we got into that as much as we should have. Whether we were prohibited by the RFP or whether we missed the opportunity to, that should have been clarified, because that would have been a significant affirmation, either way, on what the real numbers are. The vehicle maintenance component of Mr. Aguero's report. We note material differences for assumptions on items such as lubricants. Both firms know what I'm talking about. But again, the choice of the term material, that's not an economist term. That's a legal term. In most contracts and RFPs and agreements, when you talk about material differences, that is usually where we're going to try to reject a bid because of material or accept it because it's an immaterial difference. He's used that word twice. Payroll, taxes, and fringe benefits. First Transit's cost of health care is substantially lower than that of Veolia's, the result of material different assumptions regarding the distribution of employee-only, employee plus a single dependent, and family plan participants, and that First Transit health care plan can simply be provided at a lower cost. Again, material assumptions, not just assumptions. The last reference, and I'm sorry there was 4, not 3, the last reference to material he brought up in the overall conclusion. First Transit's proposal relies on ambitious efficiency assumptions, including without limitation those that may reduce total compensation to employee covered by collective bargaining agreement. From an analysis standpoint, we believe there is a material degree of uncertainty relative to whether these savings can be achieved. The last comment that doesn't have material in it, but it was interesting that he chose to close this report, or the executive summary. It appears that First Transit could withstand a loss equal to or greater than the difference between its proposed cost and Veolia's proposed cost. I asked a couple attorneys what that meant. First Transit has the wherewithal, even if there is a significant difference, to eat that, to make no profit or even lose. And I think it's a tribute to the firm and their financial stability. But the question was stated, the question was asked and the answer was given, and I think it was by a First Transit representative. We have put in our RFP what we can do. We're committed to it, we'll get it done. And the response should, or a couple responses were, hey, they promised they'll do it, it's in writing, they have to do it. Well, then again, let's just rubber stamp it and go. It's wrong, from my perspective, to just accept that. These are the kind of things that need to be done on March 10th. These are the reports that this board should get on the front end, even prior to the public hearing. It gives us a far better opportunity to make good public policy decisions. I'll take a breath. Anybody else want to join in? I have a couple more, but. And again, I thank the audience for their indulgence. I also asked the board in advance if they would allow me this courtesy or indulgence, whichever they want to feel. those comments regarding the technical evaluation, the comments regarding the price, those were my primary concerns, and I wanted to certainly elaborate on the record. I think there's just a few more that, to me, rose to the level of something needs to be addressed. I had my stuff. So if someone could just talk for 2 minutes. I apologize.
I am not as prepared with a laundry list of things I want to place on the record today. So I don't think I have anything earth-shattering to report on to anybody. But I guess if we're putting things out on the record, and I'm sure everyone's going to be talking a little more. I guess I feel like we had an RFP process. We followed that. No one contested that until the end of the game. And even with your comments, I understand the concerns you have within it, but you said the process was good. And I wanted to just quickly read, we even had a response from the FTA. And they said that this review found that your solicitation documents and staff evaluation process for the operations contract met FTA requirements. So we even had the FTA come in and review that process and say it was legitimate and it met their requirements. Now I don't have any problem with members wanting to avoid just rubber stamping and getting involved. But from my perspective, I think we followed the RFP process. There might be some concerns now, and there might be some things down the road that we want to tweak. And I think if we were really going to dissect Jeremy Aguero's report again, we probably should have invited him here, because I think we're all hearing different things. Whatever side we're on, we're pulling those things out, and that's what we're using to make our point. But at the end of the day with his report, he said even under the most favorable circumstances applied to Veolia's contract, that First Transit still wins. And that was with the most favorable circumstances. We also had another financial consultant that I know was hired by one of the other parties, but this is also another individual that many of us in our organizations have used as a financial consultant. And both of those came back that said they have the wherewithal. Now, I understand that there are some concerns, and Mr. Chairman, I believe you raised some legitimate concerns. But I think this can be done with any RFP process, and we're really clouding the issue. And I'm concerned with going in the future. I'm not quite sure. I have a lot of confidence in staff. I think they did the right thing. They went through the process correctly, and I know you stated the same thing as well. But those are just, just thinking about, as you were talking and you wanted someone to chime in and nobody was doing that, so I jumped in. I think we need to hold to that and continue down this path. And, both companies have been good companies that we've worked with. It's not like they're unknowns. They both are good companies. Some of the concerns that we had in the past about having a monopoly and other things are going to be corrected when we go through the RFP process with the paratransit, hopefully. There are some things that we may want to tweak with our RFP process. But it just seems to me that for the integrity of the process, no one questioned until at the end of the day. And I think we need to move forward with the recommendations of staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff, you want to add anything?
One other thing, Mr. Chair, if I could just add.
Please.
We did, when you talked about the $50 million, I know those numbers can be played with, so I'm not going to defend one way or the other, but through our budget process, we did adopt a budget, and no matter what we do at this point, with the current extension or whatever else, it's going to have an impact on our budget. So even though we can argue about the $50 million, there are some definite differences and between the two bids, and those will have an impact with this going down. And I think we've all talked about how we want to see our services grow. And in this economy, that's going to be very difficult. We've had a number of people get up here earlier and talk about routes that were either shortened or the timing has been lengthened on them and where they're not getting the services that they need. Moving forward without really taking those costs back into account, we're going to have to make some changes with our routes.
Thank you. So, Commissioner G, if you would kindly repeat the original motion. Councilwoman Tarkanian.
I just wanted to say that as I've watched this group work together, it isn't that anybody is favoring one group over another group or saying that they're just stuck with that group. I've watched this group work very hard in trying to make the right decision, every single member of it. I think some of the things you've pointed out are very accurate, and I think that I feel some mistakes were made. I wasn't here at the beginning. I do feel some mistakes were made, and I think, Jacob, you know this too. I mean, but those are things that happen when you're in a business or you're in a government entity, and that doesn't mean anybody's bad. Nobody was bad or did anything wrong, I think, on staff. These were just natural things that happen in governance. But what we have an opportunity to do now is look at this and see if we can make changes to improve our practice so we are more fair and so that we do a better job. You're always looking to do a better job. I think mistakes are good sometimes because you learn from them, and if you can make yourself better from learning from them, then that's what we will try to do. I just wanted to thank you also for all the information you presented.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Lydia Belinsky and all the senior staff and all the 30-plus staff at the RTC who participated in this procurement. As I said at the May 19th meeting, this was a model procurement. That's a quote from the FTA that they told us when they came in and reviewed this. That's a verbal quote from them. And I also put on the record that it's not, and I don't think there ever has been, a perfect request for proposal process. But I would like to just compliment the staff that I think the staff has been perfect in this process. I'll exclude myself from that description because I know that I was not, and I'm not. But I want to just compliment the staff for the great job that they did.
We appreciate that, Jacob, and I'll reiterate again, RTC staff is phenomenal. We know that. And I hope there's not the insinuation that a staff member did something wrong. But even when you indicate the FTA says this is a model procurement, there are components, I think critical components, that right up until this morning, when I'm asking what weighted criteria for that, is that partly my responsibility? Absolutely. But the FTA is not looking at why the board is finding out today about that. The FTA is not asking, Mr. Snow, why did you and the RTC board change from 70 to 30 to 45, 55? So those are the components that I think it is our job to question and challenge. And we're in this environment that this is not exactly the norm, but it's certainly not uncommon. And I don't think the RTC is immune to that. This is the biggest contract that we're involved with. Two good firms, two well-qualified firms, two firms that almost are identical in staff experience, et cetera. So I don't, staff is great. The train we've been chasing, if a lot of this information, and a lot of the information not only from staff, but from both proposals, and Jeremy Aguero, and other questions that may have, if that had happened on the front end, I don't think we'd be here today. I think we would have had a contract awarded. But I feel very comfortable, and you can reference the FTA letters because that seems to be the thing to do. They talk specifically about our options, and this is the second letter, and I think everybody has a copy of this one. If the RTC concludes that the terms of the current solicitation no longer accurately express the needs of the board or cannot be used to fairly evaluate the pending proposals, The Common Grant Rule and FTA Circular 4220.1F allows the RTC to reject all proposals, cancel the solicitation, and re-advertise the requirement. Of course, any such decision must be based on legitimate business reasons. And those reasons that I brought up, and I think even on the flip side of the coin that they've brought up. I'm not saying my arguments are better than Mayor Tobler's, his are better than mine. I think they're both legitimate. And according to the FTA, I think if they came in and talked to us, saw the transcripts, asked us why we feel that way, we would be meeting their expectations, along with their federal laws and guidelines. So, Commissioner June Kiliani, if you would repeat the motion.
Yes, my motion was to reject the selection of First Transit and direct staff to divide up the routes and begin the process of reprocurement. And if I might just speak briefly to that, I think both gentlemen on either side of the 4-4 have articulately argued that every person on this board considered the facts, but each one approaches it from a different perspective. And that it's not, we're not trying to substitute staff's recommendations, but in the long run, we're the ones who get to push the vote. And too often I've seen, especially in local government, where we've done the rubber stamp. And I think it's a new day. I don't like to bring up bad behavior or bad habits, but we had 4 county commissioners go to jail because people either did a wink and a nod, they looked the other way, or they rubber stamped. And so I think regardless, it's a good show that we're even having this discussion and this debate, because it says that it's a new dog in town, it's a different day, and we're not doing business as usual. Now, we all have different reasons why we approached it. I don't think any one of us has taken a side, per se, or at least I don't think that that's the case. It's how we choose to make sure that transit is offered for our constituents. And the urban core is the main affected area, and so we have to, at least for those of us in the urban core, really have to rely on that. And I want to make sure that the routes are available, the price is there, but I want to make sure that the employees are taken care of. I want to make sure that the maintenance is maintained. We have the top fleet in the United States. We cannot afford to have that go by the wayside. So those are factors that each of us took into consideration that weighed differently maybe for us. I do still take into consideration the 833 members of the employees that signed their petition. That should not be neglected as far as those that are on the day-to-day job and what some of their concerns were as well. So on the criteria, I think we've learned from this, no matter what decisions are made going forward, because we still have to deal with the paratransit contract and we still have other things that will come back at some point. I think you'll see more engagement from this board, no longer just saying, let staff take care of it, because that's not how many of us want to do business any longer. So regardless of the outcome of this vote, I think no matter, everybody's respected each other's opinions. You know, I think I've been fairly consistent. I know Lois has been and as well, and all of us saying, you know, I believe that sometimes you may have started here a year ago, and when new factors or new information come forward, you go, whoa, wait a minute. Now we have an opportunity to right that and not add to the problems or the situation. And I think several of us said, whoa, I didn't really even realize we could have divided up our contract. That was never really a conversation that we had. We were out to bid and it brought back. And so, again, as the chairman says, shame on us for not maybe questioning or positing or raising those issues. But we have an opportunity now, in my opinion, to do the right thing by this valley. And that is not continue to create a monopoly and make sure that not only do we get the best value dollar-wise, but we get the best value employee-wise and maintenance-wise, along with, I do think, innovations and different ways of doing business and doing what they do in Boston, which is allowing us for people to have an app on their phone to know where their bus lines are coming. Those are all things that we should be spending the time discussing so that we're making it easier for folks that have to ride our transit authority. So regardless of what happens with the outcome of this, because I have a feeling I might know or suspect or maybe it's with hope. No matter what, we still have other opportunities here. And I think that's really what this debate and this discussion came down, is how do you choose to look at that opportunity for making the decision? Is First Transit a good company? Absolutely. Is Veolia a good company? Absolutely. I just wish, unfortunately, that they could have come together and said, you know what, we've got a different way of looking at how to do business, and we're doing it that way in various other communities, and let us help you resolve this matter rather than deciding it in the courts. But it is what it is at this point, and we'll see what happens after this vote. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner, two things. If we could clarify, because I'm not sure council gave us on the direct staff. I don't think splitting the bid. I think it's just re-procure. I don't think that.
Well, I believe your motion was to reject the proposals, not make the award, and direct staff to, and to approve a re-procurement. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
And I promise this will be the last thing I say. I need to disclose for the record, and I disclosed at an earlier meeting, that Terry Murphy, who is involved with the First Transit Group, was involved in a campaign, a political campaign of mine as a paid consultant. It's been brought to my attention that Patrick Smith is also involved, but with Veolia, and Patrick was a paid consultant on my campaign. With that disclosure, I still feel comfortable, especially since they're on both sides of the aisle, but I did want to make sure that that remains part of the record.
Mr. Chairman, to further clarify for you, those were previous campaigns. It's not an ongoing campaign, correct?
I'm not running for anything, so I hope not.
Actually, legally, Mr. Chair, that would not matter anyway. It's regardless, it's whether disclosure requires if there's a direct pecuniary interest, which there wasn't. There was a layer, I believe. But if someone has, in light of, yeah, to be proper, everybody should disclose if they have a potential conflict, regardless, because with the new state ethics ruling or the Supreme Court ruling that came down where there's a different nexus regarding the Reno council person, then I think people should just be on the safe side. But really, the law expects you to disclose and vote and not play the game of abstentions to refrain from making difficult decisions. And that's a game that had been played down here in the past. So.
Amended motion on the floor. All those in favor, raise your hand. There are 4 votes in favor. All those opposed to the motion, raise your hand. And there are 4. It is a tie vote, and that motion is rejected.
That motion fails, correct.
It's up to you.
If someone else makes a different motion, that's the discretion of the board.
I make a motion to award it to First Transit and follow staff's recommendation.
There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor, raise your hand. So 4 votes. All those opposed, raise your hand. There are 4 votes opposed. That 4-4 tie means the motion is rejected. And we move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your next item is item 52, which is to receive a report on re-procurement considerations for the operations and maintenance of fixed route transit services and direct staff accordingly. In light of the previous vote failing, it's up to the discretion to the board if they want to hear this item, or we could move on to item 53.
Pleasure of the board. Commissioner June Kiliani.
Thank you. Litigation, unfortunately, is going to be apparently what's going to move forward. You did give us a couple-page document to look at for fixed route considerations. I would ask that maybe we bring that back next meeting, regardless of how the court process, so we could begin to give some guidance to fix maybe some areas that we think may need to be tweaked, not to micromanage, but to set some policies, and if that would be acceptable to the chair and the other members of the commission. I think that at least makes sense to at least keep that conversation going forward.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Jean Kelly, staff would be happy to do that at the next meeting. We don't consider that, we consider that very appropriate for the board to have that role.
There was some discussion, I don't know if you, about the idea of some subcommittee or working group for.
We're going to look at the
That was for the
paratransit,
paratransit, yeah.
and we'll see how that works, and then that might be a good model to look at.
Okay,
Excuse me,
Move to set this matter aside, and it'll come back as it comes back, but then give staff the direction with regard to bringing back the conversation for the procurement considerations on fixed route.
Direction.
Mr. Kaplan, direction?
That could just be direction, that's fine.
Thank you. Councilwoman Tarkanian?
and that direction that you're giving, Chris, is in order to integrate things that have been learned through this past experience so that we can make a better means of doing a job.
Correct, to give guidance to staff, as well as past boards had made policies back and forth. They used to review the RFPs and give direction, and then they gave it to staff. It's gone back and forth on this. I think this board may want to make a different decision with regarding to what they want to see, recommendations. And we've got a 3-page document that gives us some outlines of options of how do you look at a contract? How do you make a decision when something goes for request for proposal versus a bid? How do you make a decision on what areas are of value and what weighs more than something else? I mean, we may want to be clearer about spelling out price as a subset with these 4 items, and technical includes X, Y, and Z, those types of things. Or we may want to applaud innovations and new technologies that come into play and call that out within it. So those are the types of things I was thinking.
Right, and then we could set that as our policy.
Correct.
And keep it consistent.
That would be my thought, but that, again, that would be for the board to discuss.
You have direction?
We have direction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Your next item is item 53, which is to receive a report on procurement considerations for the operations and maintenance of specialized transit services and direct staff accordingly. And at the last regular scheduled meeting on September the 8th, Commission directed the staff to come back with an item on this, and I have a presentation I'd like to make to you, because we are seeking the Commission input on the scope of work for paratransit services. And in researching various models, we've come up with the following options. We can go to the next slide, please. For the scope of the contract, you have, it's fairly simple. We have a number of vehicles in our paratransit fleet. We have what we feel is an adequate supply of paratransit vehicles to meet what was the demand a couple of years ago. With the recent increase in demand, that has placed a strain on our vehicle fleet. And so one of the options you have is you can agree to have the RTC provide all the vehicles, and you can direct us to go out and obtain more vehicles. Or one of the options we have done from 2001 to 2006 was we had a contractor provide vehicles for the CAT-STAR and senior transportation services of the RTC. So you can structure it where RTC provides all the vehicles, or the RTC provides most of the vehicles and brings in, or the contractor brings in some vehicles. Other considerations that we think are important to bring to your attention are you could just have one contractor do everything, including help us fill a need that we have right now, because we have an overwhelming demand for scheduling rides in our call center, and we do not have, in my opinion, enough staff right now to handle that demand appropriately and still meet ADA guidelines. Or you can go to a contract system with one contractor that doesn't provide any call center assistance, and we can staff up and hope that that demand remains consistent. We don't have to furlough employees later on. Or we can go to a different model which would involve multiple contractors. We're going to talk a little about each one of those options. We can go to the next slide, please. If you have one contractor that does everything, including bring in some temporary assistance to help us in the call center to meet the call demand, they can do everything, and that would be designed to ensure that the RTC does not have ADA capacity denials due to lengthy hold times for our customers who are on the phone. If you have a single contractor without call center assistance, we would need to do something internally to staff up to meet that demand. I want to just spend a moment discussing multiple contractors And if the board decided to give us direction to split off our service into multiple contractors, we could have a bid on each of our different services separately. A core ADA paratransit service would be the largest component of that. Overnight ADA service, CatStar, senior transportation such as Silver Star and Flexible Demand Response, our agency subscription, and certainly the call center support. If we were to split this up into multiple contractors, then that would allow not-for-profits to bid on some of the smaller contracts and would also allow smaller regional transportation providers to bid on some of those services as well. I need to note that the multiple contractor option does not exclude a final result that awards all services to one contractor, but it does allow for multiple price options by service and could be of advantage to the board. And we would recommend that a traditional request for proposal be used over a bid process in paratransit just to ensure that the best value is not lost in the multiple bids. Keeping in mind that for paratransit, we're dealing with an extremely sensitive clientele, the severely disabled and the elderly. Now, in terms of the contract term that you have, there are a number of, literally hundreds of different combinations of options that you could come up with. But recent industry direction nationwide is to award longer contract terms, and that allows you to obtain stability in service, and it also allows some cost advantages. And if you go with a longer-term variable, you still have the flexibility to adjust to economic or service design issues as needed. You can see here at the top that if you go with a 10-year option, you could have a 2-year base contract with some 3-year renewals and then 1 2-year renewal. That's we think, a good model to follow. If you wanted to go with a shorter term, maybe a 3-year base with a 3-year option and 2 years after that, and you can see the 6-year and the 5-year respectively with the different terms. But we do strongly recommend that the 2-year base should be what we go with for any of these contract options, especially if we're going to split up the contract and have multiple providers. We think that the shorter term is the best flexibility and the best thing for the community. Options for the solicitation process. As I've mentioned, you can have what we've done in the past, which is number 1 on the screen, the traditional request for proposals. That's also been referred to as the best value procurement, where we would have a weighting between cost and technical capacity, like we've done and has been mentioned today. The other option you have is just to go to a 2-step bid process where we would pre-qualify contractors, and then those contractors that have been pre-qualified would submit a price, and the low bid would win in that second step. In terms of different ways to evaluate the contract, you as members of the commission could serve as the evaluators. Issues there are, it's going to take a lot of time, and that is something to consider. You'd have to make yourselves available for evaluation committee meetings and for interviews with the prospective proposers. And we'd also need to insert an anti-lobbying clause in the procurement documents. And if you're going to serve as evaluators, you can't be lobbied by the various proposers. In terms of cross-functional staff, that's pretty much the way that we have done it all along. There's a lot of staff time. We allow for utilization of functional area experts that way, and they have a lot of knowledge of the systems and the operations. You can go out and hire consultants to assist you or to do the whole evaluation if you choose. And that does cost some money. There is some travel involved in that. And that also involves the issue of the folks coming from out of town have limited knowledge of the local operating environment. They also have limited knowledge of the RTC policies and plans. And the last option is really a mixture of the previous 2 or possibly even the previous 3. There is an issue for staff time, but we do allow for the provision for functional area experts. We have the knowledge of the system, the operations locally, and we also could bring in other transportation agency staff from other municipal, county, or regional agencies that could help us with the evaluation. We would have the use of their time for free, but we would have to pay for their travel. Those are the options that we see at this point in time for possible evaluators to participate in the paratransit procurement. If we can go, generally the board will need to select from the following items. Decide on the scope of work, 1 contractor to do it all or multiple contractors. decided and give us some recommendation on the procurement format, if we do an RFP versus a bid process. And as I've mentioned, it's our recommendation to you that because of this more sensitive nature of paratransit, that we do the standard traditional RFP, the best value procurement. And then it comes down to really number 3, if we go with an RFP, the evaluation factors, how much of a weight you want to put on cost, how much of a weight you want to put on technical capacity and capability, and then the overall term of the contract. And so at this time, RTC staff is looking for direction on items 1 through 3 that you see on your screen.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. Mayor Tobler.
Well, I guess just a suggestion, because this is a complicated process, there's a lot to look at. I don't know if I would be prepared to really weigh in at this point, but maybe if we had a committee or a workshop that move forward with this and bring back a recommendation to the board, maybe a better way to do this and occupy our time a little better on this and come up with the decisions. I personally, once again, I'll state again that I'm not an expert in transportation, and I really do look to the staff for their recommendations, and I believe they have the expertise, but certainly the board, if there's areas that they want to tweak or look at, I would be supportive of that, but it might be better served through a committee.
Councilwoman March.
Thank you. Clearly, we have one of the top regional transportation commissions in the nation, and we've been acknowledged for performance and for leadership in our creative approaches. And one of the things that I'd like to commend Jacob and the staff of the RTC is their ability to adapt and to be flexible and to look at other solutions. So I really appreciate that. You know, I liked what you were talking about in terms of the multiple providers, because I know in some of our outlying areas like Sun City Anthem, we have much smaller buses. In fact, we have the vans that serve our community. And maybe there's another way to look at this. And Mayor Tobler suggested that perhaps we should have workshops where we bring folks together to have some dialogue so that we can begin to, at an earlier stage, to develop the RFP that we want to use for this effort. So I would support that as well.
Commissioner Giuncaliani.
Thank you. I think that's a very good idea. It's number one, especially with the disabled or the elderly, you've got a community that's very active and interested in, and there might even be some individuals that could give us guidance that deal in the world of ADA that we could reach out to in that manner. I have a couple questions if you could explain to me, Jacob. Our folks right now are on 410s, correct?
The agency is open officially Monday through Thursday, and pretty much the entire staff is on 410.
Okay. For the call center purposes, are they Monday through Thursday as well, or they do stagger Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, Wednesday, Saturday, you know, that type of a thing, so that they're doing all of them?
Not just in the call center, but we have a number of operational entities at the RTC that are 7 days a week, and the call center is included with that.
Okay. So when you're asking us to consider the 4 days a week, removing, staff would be reassigned to 4 days per week, who would be reassigned if we already have that in place?
What the commission could consider would be to have the existing call center staff that are RTC employees work essentially Monday through Thursday. And then if there is a paratransit contractor for the core paratransit service or others that could propose bringing in their own employees to staff our call center for the other 3 remaining days of the week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or some sort of a combination like that.
When's the heavier volume?
You know, it is spread throughout the week, and we could have, if you wanted, we could have our staff come up and give you a specific answer, but when we get to, and it depends on the time of the month, when certain groups of people get their checks as well, we can have heavier volumes. If we're scheduling for Monday, we have a 3-day advance from that. We can be heavy on Friday. There's also pretty heavy midweek call volume as well. And Kenny Rodriguez, who's our Director of Customer Service in the call center, is here, and I'll have him answer those questions.
Thank you, Jacob. Traditionally, you see the heaviest call volume the first 2 weeks of the month. Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are usually the heaviest as far as the paratransit. We do also take fixed route calls too, and those vary. But for paratransit, it's mainly Monday through Wednesday, first 2 weeks of the month, and kind of goes up towards the very end of the month too, because they're booking for the beginning of the month.
Could you, is there like a flow chart or a one-pager or two-pager that outlines what our policies are with regarding to who calls, how they qualify, when they can call, how long can they make an appointment for, what's our requirement to cancel? Because I think as we meet with these groups or whatever, it'd be helpful to know you got to call on Monday for Friday, but what happens if you have an emergency doctor's appointment? Those types of things, so at least we're aware of what the impacts could be on our folks.
Yes, we could put together some documentation
Okay,
for
if that
you.
would be acceptable, Mr. Chair. And then I have a couple more. On 2.2, Jacob, if multiple contractors, how would the service be divided? Overnight ADA paratransit service offered between hours of 10 and 5. We do that currently?
We've done that in the past where we've had taxi companies or other providers provide the overnight service for us, and we had mixed success when we
Okay.
did that.
So that's what that item, so we could look at something differently there that may have
We
changed.
could look to going back to something that like we used to do previously. if
Then number
if the commission
5,
wants.
senior transportation service, flux demand response, and Silver Star routes are designed for seniors in the community. I think there's, 8 or 10 areas that they do Silver Star, or maybe that would be another thing, to get us a list of where they currently serve, where we've had requests for serve that we haven't been able to accommodate, so that if we did look at additional folks, we'd know where we might need to place
Sure.
them. I tend not to want to contract out. That's kind of my personal concern, but I don't think it's bad for us to look at nonprofits being able to compete. I would caution on the call center concept. That one bothers me a little bit more management-wise. We did that at UMC, and it was a mess. We had an outside contractor come in, take up the space, use all of our equipment, and sit next to the same people doing the billing. We did most of the work for them, and they got paid differently. So you got to be careful on how you kind of do that shared concept. So I would hope that that would be something we take with a grain of salt to some extent. Then you're looking at the contract terms, 10-year, 8-year, 6-year, 5-year. I know for the larger businesses, we're looking at 8 to 10 years, I think, in the county for some of really big. I would be cautious to do that long of an extension for a nonprofit, just because they tend to turn over, and I don't want to just start up a nonprofit that can't be successful. So we'd have to have some kind of there's upstart costs, I understand that, but I don't know that going that length of a service.
We agree, and that's why all of our recommendations, if you're going the multiple contractor route, would be to have an initial 2-year term.
Okay, to start that off. And then what weighted criteria and price, what did we do in the past? In the past, we did 18% price, technical 82, technical 80, price 20%. We may want to play with that and then maybe add an area, and I don't know how that works, of customer service, innovation, just things along those lines to make sure that we're giving some recognition for that part of it. And I'd just throw that out. Again, I don't know what percentages are right or wrong. To me, though, technical, I guess, means the fleet and
customer service and who the personnel are and their approach to delivering the service. And you can also include, and we did on Fixed Route for the first time, we include a financial innovation and technology innovation category. That was the first time we ever did that. So you could also include something like that under technical if you wanted.
And do we, I forgot to ask this, do we in the paratransit component, if a student graduates from school and they have an IEP that is current, do we accept that for transportation if their IEP called out for transportation services?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Maybe that's just something, Sandy, or somebody can kind of get a question answered, because that might be another population that we've tended not to think about, because they do a transition IEP, unlike the colleges and university who make the family go spend a whole gazillion dollars more to reprove that they actually were in special ed for the last 10 years. If we accepted that IEP and it did accommodate through transportation services, they may be able to ride the regular. So that might be another place to redirect to regular rather than on the paratransit, but it just would be something to take a look at if I might throw that.
Commissioner, with regard to that, it's still going to be governed by the ADA, the functional ability to ride transit.
Correct. They'd probably
and
still have
so-
to go through our screening component.
Correct.
But what I'm saying
But
is.
if they've been certified for it, that's not going to change whether they're in high school, out of high school, it doesn't matter.
Right. It's just that we shouldn't spend more money or make the family have to go through. We can do our hoops, but if it calls for transportation transition, which could be regular or fixed route or paratransit, how do we incorporate that to make sure that we are accepting those or recognizing those? Those are just some questions I have, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair. Thank you.
Actually, that could be coordinated with the
That's-
new intensive training program, too, that we have.
That might be an idea,
Yeah.
too.
Mayor Tolbert, thank you, Commissioner. Did you have some direction, or did we give direction, Jake?
I heard that there was a recommendation to establish a committee on the board, or a subcommittee, or a working group, I think I heard.
I think it's up to the board if they want to do a workshop or a committee/workshop. I'm okay with whichever way they want to go.
I would be inclined to have a workshop, but then also in this workshop process, maybe there's steps that would include folks from industry that would have some input into the process, and so that we can evaluate their recommendations and move forward on that.
I think a workshop actually would be good, so we find out what questions are out there that we still need to answer with regard to procurement. Perhaps an evening meeting or workshop, or maybe one during the day and one in the evening in order to accommodate working folks. And within that, maybe reach out to the school district transition team, our CAC group. You know, we have folks that could also give us some advice and suggestions. Yes. We have 504 coordinators that are out there. I mean, there's just additional folks that maybe we could bring in that would help give us guidance to make sure we're really covering the bases as far as that.
We could invite the board to our next TAC committee, which is
That'd be cool.
Transportation
And we should hear
access.
from First Transit as well as the provider of what's working, what isn't working. Are there things that we have policies in place that maybe don't exist and should, or are impediments? I mean, those are types of things we should look at as well.
Mr. Chair, I think there's different ways you could do it, but maybe as far as the procurement process, I think you're hearing that we like the idea of splitting it up or looking at different services, and maybe have a committee from this board look at that aspect as well as some of the RFP process. And then through the TAC or whatever else, that can be incorporated in even further. I'm just throwing that out as a suggestion. That goes out to the community.
I'll take that suggestion in the form of a motion to form a subcommittee of the board that will be selected as the general manager calls around for interest.
And then that, of course, will be a public meeting.
So we'll take that as a motion, Mayor. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Item 54 is approve and adopt Resolution 290 requesting that the Board of Clark County Commissioners issue revenue refunding in a principal amount not to exceed $150 million for the purpose of the cost of refunding all or a portion of the Nevada Highway Revenue Motor Vehicle Fuel Tax Improvement and Refunding Bond Series 2003. And we have, I believe, Mr. Mark Trosdahl, our Director of Finance, is here to introduce this item.
Thank you, Jacob. Members of the board. We also have some experts from our financial advisory firm and the attorneys on this. Basically, it's a simple bond refunding that if the markets cooperate with us, we could stand to save about $7 million in interest over the next 12 years, if the markets cooperate. That's the real hard part. They've been kind of volatile the last couple of weeks, so we're not really sure how that's going to land when we do actually close the bonds or put them up for sale.
Staff recommendation?
Staff recommendation is to approve this resolution.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
That motion carries.
Thank you. When you save that revenue, where does it need to go back? Does it go back into paying off when you reduce the $7 to $8 million savings, then where do we pay off additional bonds? Is that how that works, or where does that go?
We could pay off additional bonds early, but we also have the option of using that money to fund additional projects.
Okay, so we're not restricted. That was, okay, thank you. Good.
Other than that it's fuel tax, so it's restricted.
Right, so it's restricted
that way.
in that component on where you can expend it, but we could use it for other operating potentially.
It can be
Okay,
used on
thank you.
roadway projects. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Trailing items? Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we vote? Okay. It's been a long day, long morning, excuse me. Item 55 is to approve the award of bid 1234, general market bus shelters to the lowest responsive bidder, which is Tolar Manufacturing, and that's for 150 new bus shelters. And we also have Carl Scarborough from our staff who's going to talk about this item, and he's also going to address the questions that Councilwoman Tarkanian had about bus shelters and bus stops in the last meeting. I'd like to have Carl come forward at this time.
Good
He's
morning,
here.
thank you. We have an item before you to award a bid for initial order of 150 bus shelters and for additional phases after this. These are the same design as the general market bus shelters that we've already installed. And we have a map to show you where the first 150 will go. And this is the shelter, and then here's the map. So you can see all the locations. There are 70 locations in Clark County, 38 in the city of Las Vegas, 15 in Henderson, and 27 in North Las Vegas. And then at the last meeting, there were some questions that came up about Sahara and what we were doing there. And then to address those issues is my esteemed colleague, David Swallow, to talk about Sahara.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, at the last meeting, one of the citizens that was here was kind enough to bring to our attention a lack in the amenities that we have on Sahara because of the aggressive construction schedule that we've had and the removal of bus shelters to make room for the improvements. In response to that, within a week, we identified 22 of the busiest stops along the corridor and installed benches at those stops. We watched it for a couple more weeks, saw that there was a higher volume of people than we even anticipated, so we doubled up those benches the following week. And so we've put over 40 benches out there on the corridor, as you can see in the slide here. Well used. The picture on the lower left is the Maryland Parkway westbound stop on Sahara. If we go to the next slide. These are the locations throughout the corridor that you see really are high loading points that line up pretty well with the grid network. Go to the next slide. The good news is that we've also started installing the new shelters that are coming in as part of the Sahara BRT project. We started down at Mojave going westbound, and this week we'll probably have, I think they're installing the Maryland Parkway stop today. We'll have, by the end of next week, 12 shelters that we will take possession of and begin serving those stops with the new shelters along the north side of Sahara between Mojave and Paradise. 2 weeks after that, we'll take the shelters along the south side between Paradise and Mojave, and then we'll keep progressing westward as the shelters are installed and we accept them. We'll begin serving those stops, and so that our patrons can enjoy improved amenities. So, one of the other things that we do is we do try to remind everybody of what is going on with the project. On a weekly basis, we do send out e-blasts to over 1,000 people who have signed up to get information on Sahara. But here on our website, we've added a new feature that can, if you want to just go to our website and see what construction is going to be going on at any different point in the corridor. Go to the next slide. We have kind of an interactive map, and as you move your cursor across the map, it'll show you the types of work that is being done in the different sections. This also reflects the same information that we send out with our weekly e-blasts to stakeholders. Next slide. You can see how you can just move along there. Next slide. On the left is a copy of what we send out on a weekly basis. We also post this to Twitter and Facebook just to keep everybody apprised of what's going on. We recognize that it certainly is a pretty large project and it has the potential to impact a number of folks along the corridor, so we want to keep everybody up to date on what's going on. The good news is that most of the paving is completed. We will be wrapping up paving operations in mid-November. We'll stripe the corridor by the end of November, and really, if you go along from pretty much Mojave to Paradise. It's all new pavement in there, freshly striped. Same thing going from Rancho almost to Decatur. We've put in the new pavement. We're working westward. They'll be paving next week and the week after between Decatur and Rainbow, and then moving westward from there. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Councilwoman
Tarkanian?
I just want to make the comment, it was wonderful the alacrity you showed in meeting the concerns of the citizens on Sahara. You really got those benches up quickly, and it was most appreciated by them. So I wanted to sort of commend you. I don't think they thought we could get it done that fast. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff does recommend
Excuse me, Jake. Commissioner June Kilani? Sorry, I missed
Sorry,
that.
I know everybody wants to go to lunch. I didn't see trash cans.
We have been putting more trash cans out there. We do have, these temporary stops where we did not have any amenities, benches or trash cans.
Right, I know, and I appreciate something, and I know Councilwoman Tarkanian want to ride around with outdoor promotions, in fact, but I think that's got to be something that's imperative, because otherwise we just devalue our property if we don't have a place for people to put their trash. And then secondly, and maybe you moved it up the street, where did this, there had been seats, no cover, on Maryland and Charleston, which was, I guess, the opposite side of the 109, right next to the auto mall. Now there's nothing there. So did we move that stop, Carl? I happened to drive by it this morning.
Yeah, we actually did. That stop has been relocated near side, so it's south of Charleston as you're going north on Maryland. Because of the corner there, and the bus was then making a left turn.
It was making
at
the left
Bonneville.
anyway, so that's where you add the two benches.
Yeah, there was a safety concern there.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so we moved it
and
back.
Actually, it's been clean now, so that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Wait, one more question. I noticed that the latest shelter that you showed us here was different somewhat from the ones we've had before. It seemed to have more backing, and that should help us for people who are in there and they get the heavy sun through that opening in the back. Is that correct?
Actually, yes, and to add to that, this shelter is shown on, this reflects the type of shelter that we're putting on the north side of the street, and you can see a vertical screen in the front. So, even during certain times of day, the sun still creeps in under the roof, and so we did put that vertical screen to really provide a larger shaded area.
That's wonderful, too. For the everyday citizen that rides those buses, those are big things. Thank you.
Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff does recommend the approval of the award of this bid for the 150 shelters to Tolar Manufacturing.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, we're now going to go back to our consent agenda items that were taken off the consent agenda and trailed to the end of the agenda. And Dr. Fred O'Haney will introduce items 34, 40, and 41.
Thank you, Jacob. Item 34 is to approve an amendment to contract number 11-051 with Atkins North America, Inc. for the before and after study of neighborhood study for Clark County in the amount of $100,000 and authorize the chairman to sign. Mr. Chairman, this study was undertaken at the request of Clark County to look at safety issues in the area of the county bounded by Sahara, Decatur, Rainbow, and Desert Inn. This amendment is just to look at the strategies that the county is now going to implement and evaluate how effective those strategies would work. Staff is recommending approval of this item.
Commissioner.
Thank you. I asked it to be set aside because I wanted to know what the neighborhoods were, because it ended right on the one corridor, and I think staff is willing to expand that in the study. It shouldn't affect the cost. Trying to look at the commercial center. Oh, is that the next one? That's the next one. Okay. The striping. Okay, this is my other issue. All right. This is one that I've raised with our Public Works, and I'm hoping that we can either have an agenda item or work somehow, and Jacob and I have talked about this, with regards to doing the new way of striping for bicycle lanes, which is sidewalk, lane, parking. It automatically does a traffic calming, but it enforces the law of the 3-foot rule without doing it and makes it safer for bicycle riders. But I also thought it would be key if we can get all the jurisdictions on the same policy for striping, so that I'm not riding down Okie in the city and then all of a sudden it goes across the street down Sahara to the county and it's different. We need to have a similar policy. So I'd been talking to Dennis to see how we could implement something along those lines. And I just thought this might be an agenda item to at least bring that up so we don't get it lost in the discussion, if that's acceptable. So.
I'd like to comment. The RTC is actually working on a project referred to as our complete street study. And one of the elements is exactly what you just described. We're looking at various cross-sections within the 100 feet and 80 feet right-of-way to look at how we implement bike options. So as that project evolves, we'll be glad to bring that back to the board.
Okay, and remind me the timeline on the Complete Streets project.
Right now, we're looking at getting a draft report sometime by the end of this year. And then we're also going to invite other stakeholders, such as NEOP and some of the home builders associations, get their input, revise the document, and then bring it through our committees and then to the board.
Between now and the end of the year, we could have that striping policy addressed, at least for your 80-foot and larger?
I don't think we'll have that before the end of this year. I think you'll have that sometime next year. However, nothing precludes the public works directors from implementing what you just described at this time.
So we can still, I just don't want to, you know what, we take forever, and if, I don't want people wasting money striping something and then 2 months later have to go back and do something differently. And I do think we should make sure we incorporate in our studies the safe routes to schools, because you've got a lot of schools that if you want young people riding their bikes or walking, that let's make sure we coordinate that part of it. So that would just be a thought as well.
Thank you. Councilwoman March?
Will there also be a public education element to this to ensure that we're educating the public so that they understand what we're doing, and then also allowing maybe the municipalities and the county time to, because there'll be a transition time and cost to restripe? And
that's why I think I think Dennis told me that there's a Public Works Directors Committee or something that get together, and that might be the next approach, and I offered to go down and make my pitch. And if they can recommend that, then yes, then they can come up with a timeline for implementation. I just don't want somebody now going out to stripe and then they've changed the policy and then wasting money and time and making it even more confusing. So, sure. Thank you.
Staff recommends approval.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 40 is to approve contract number 12-065 with Kim Il-hon and Associates to conduct a community mobility study for Central Las Vegas in the amount of $300,000 and authorize the chairman to sign the contract. I believe this is what you had comments about in terms of the study area.
Commissioner?
The community mobility study is, this one's restricted to the
basically looking at 3-mile radius from the
right. And so if the circle could, because the backup, it said it didn't do south of Sahara and it didn't do the commercial area. And to me, that's the networking between the city and the county. So I would hope that we would not restrict it to that and use the full 3-mile radius.
Yeah, actually, we've revised their backup to this agenda.
Okay.
We distributed that to show the full circle.
Okay, excellent. And that would be it. Then I might ask, this is an entree to another agenda item for down the road. There was a study done long before I think most of us got on to look at one-way on Paradise and one-way on Industrial/Frank Sinatra Drive. And they also looked at a study on Las Vegas Boulevard. And I think personally it's time to have that, maybe a presentation update us what that study even said and looked at. There's some potential now to really look at how we want to move traffic flow, that things have slowed down. There may be ways to reduce the number of cutouts for turnouts out of businesses. There may be a way where there's no bus stop just because we've never anticipated that. Looking at what businesses, so look, maybe if at least a presentation on what had been looked at in the past. And I know it's probably not well, in the past, I think the Strip did not want to deal with the issue of the one-way or some other traffic mode or more pedestrian mode. But I think that's still our policy decision, and it should be revisited to at least have a discussion, Mr. Chair. And combined with that is I've been meeting with Metro, who are very concerned about their public response, firefighters' public response time if anything happens on the Strip. And it's really a different opportunity, because then we could really work on looking at time, manner, place for the handbilling and all the other things that go into more of a pedestrian realm there. But we really ought to look at that traffic flow corridor. And I read about it, but I've never actually seen it. So this kind of gave me an idea, so I hope you don't mind.
Sure. We'll be glad to talk to the county and that. I think the county did the one on Paradise, and then the one on Industrial and Frank Sinatra was done by NDOT.
Okay.
So we'll talk to them and hopefully in the future bring an agenda item
Okay,
to the board.
if that would be exciting. And there's no rush. I just wanted to.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Ross?
Mr. Haney just confirmed that the Las Vegas Boulevard is a state route, so that would have to have.
It used to, but now the county has jurisdiction.
But NDOT had done that study, and I've never seen it, so I thought maybe we should at least see it as a board. And then now that did get turned over to the county, correct?
Yes. Happy birthday.
With no maintenance.
Yeah.
Staff recommends approval.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 41 is to approve contract number 12-066 with CH2M Hill, Inc. to conduct a Las Vegas region freight data collection study in the amount of $250,000 and authorize the chairman to sign. This item is part of our planning program funded by the federal government, and every so often we're required to look at freight movements within the region. This study is supposed to take care of that need. And I understand you have some questions.
Commissioner.
Thank you. The main question is, this is a federal requirement, and we're required to do it every so often, but it just seemed like one where, as we're looking at the freight distribution, there may be an opportunity now to, how do we offload so that cargo and back of the house stuff doesn't come onto our streets, where we're easing some of that traffic line. And I know the legislature looked last session at some kind of a logistics port or something, a cargo port, and I think Jacob's going to reach out, or maybe you might want to the chair of Government Affairs, who's still working on that. And so that way, if we're going to do a study, there might be something that they could take a look at that would complement or at least assist them. So that was the thought, Mr. Chair. Other than that, I'd be happy to make a recommendation for approval.
I'd just like to comment. I know that NAOP has done some work in this area, and it might be good to be working closely with the Office and Industrial folks on this as well.
Sure.
There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your next item is citizens' participation.
Mr. Todd Farlow.
Thank you. Todd Farlow, 240 North 19th Street. I have 3 items. Number 1, whoever was responsible for that marathon paving thing on I-95 or the 115, they ought to be hauled up and lavished with praise and accolades, because that was something was done right there. Number 2.
Jake, can we take credit for that?
No. Number 2. During the break, I stood at the overlook at the amphitheater out there. Absolutely beautiful. You look at one end, you get the beautiful structure of the red rock. You look another way, you get the Lou Ruvo Clinic, World Market Center, the premium shops all the way around, the beautiful landscaping with the trees. It looks like a forest. And then the Newport Lofts. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, when you're done with this, go out there and just take a 360 there. Beautiful. That being said, why is it in here that we do not have a clock? We have a sound system that is atrocious and seats that came from the Inquisition. It's like you don't love us. Number 3.
I second that.
Number 3, and this is regards to the bike trails. Now, Mr. Levitt is working, trying to get all the people together on that. But on the corner of the I-95 and the Charleston and the Acceleration Lane, there is a safety issue there, all right? Now, Mr. Levitt's been on the job for 60 days. At the end of 90 days, I mean, if world peace, he hasn't come up with world peace, then there's options. Number one, he's hauled to the rotunda and flogged, or else I suggest that he direct the bicycle traffic down there at that intersection. Now, Glenn thinks that the better idea would be to put up some sort of a solar pedestrian warning light at that. I go for the flogging. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Sandra Raymaker? Try it again. Senator.